the Type 5 with Neil Treacy. That's where we're starting. Neil, the props union that you're a member of, proud day for you yesterday as Tadhg Furlong announced, yeah, I'm going to sign a deal, but only for 1 year, because I think that the world is going to be in a better place in 12 months' time. Not only that, I think I'm going to be in a better place in 12 months' time. Not only that, I think the whole world is going to be ringing Tadhg Furlong saying, come and play for us.
Top 14 owners putting away their few pounds every week into the credit union just to stash it away to approach Tadhg Furlong in a few months' time. Smart and sensible way to do it. No, it's very interesting, to be honest. The fact that he only took a one year contract, and as you can see on OTBSports.com this morning, we have quotes from him saying that there was a multi-year deal on the table. Now he doesn't go into details about whether that multi-year contract was for the same value, or was it for less than he'd be getting across just 1 year. So that's probably what we have to speculate on. Is it more lucrative for him to be taking a 1 year deal and taking, because he does have a little bit of risk involved in it, that if he gets another bad injury, if his form falls off a cliff, which look, we've seen it happen, injury is very much a possibility as well, given you're coming off the back of a long season and a Lions tour. That's when things can be picked up like that. But he's backing himself at the end of the day that in a few months' time he's going to be in an even better position, rugby-wise and financially. I suppose that the RFU are going to be in a better position to be able to offer him more money as well.
Yeah, do we have any idea how much a tight head prop is paid these days? What's the going rate?
It's kind of hard to say what the going rate is. It is one of the better paid positions on the pitch, is probably the best way of putting it. You see the position charts that I think it's Sportif bring out every year, and they kind of rank it across the top 14, the Premiership and the Pro 14. I was trying to figure out what the name of that league was these days, but they break it down as to what are the most lucrative positions in the pitch across these various leagues, and generally speaking, it is tight head, prop, out half, and second row are the in around the top three in those three divisions. Well, interesting enough, something like hooker and loosehead are much further down the chart. So he is in very much a money position. And if he is going to have a very, very good Lions tour and maybe start the season well for Leinster next season, then these negotiations are realistically going to be starting in another, what are we going to say, 4 or 5 months' time, maybe?
Yeah.
It's not as if we're waiting another 12 months. It's not as if he has to have another good year of rugby to be in this excellent bargaining position. He just has to keep playing like this for another few months until they step back into negotiations. And hopefully by then, the IRFU are going to be in a position where, even if they don't have fans back in the stadiums, that at the very least they have light at the end of the tunnel, and they have an idea of when they are going to have it, and they can map it out accordingly, because I think Tadhg Furlong is a must-keep.
How many players exist in the realm of Johnny Sexton when Sexton went to Paris to play and was allowed to continue playing for Ireland? How many other players at the moment would exist in a similar realm?
I'm honestly, you have to make a guess on it, because the important part is David Nucifora wasn't calling the shots back then. He is now. And he seems to be, at the very least, a very, very stubborn man, and a very, very hard man to budge off his convictions and his opinions. And that's the dangerous game, for instance, that Tadhg Furlong would have to play if the offer coming in from the IRFU isn't as good in a few months' time, and they're not able to give him the big money. That if he does take an opportunity in France, or if he is considering an opportunity abroad, that he does have to take on the risk that the RFU will be dangling that international selection ahead of him. He will have to call that bluff. And look, I don't think it's particularly similar to Johnny Sexton's situation in 2013, because as much as Tadhg Furlong is probably the best tight-head prop in the world, you also have his, the next option behind him is Andrew Porter, who, while he's not at Tadhg Furlong level, he's soon to be a British and Irish Lion. He has proved over the course of the last 2 years that he is absolutely at test level. So Tadhg Furlong wouldn't exactly be, leaving Ireland with slim pickings when it comes to tight head prop. They would just be leaving them with someone who is very, very good, but just not quite as good as him.
I think they'd make an exception for Tadhg Furlong. I think he's the only one at the moment.
I don't know.
I think you can justify it by saying he's getting £1 million or whatever it is, right? It could be like that. The level he's at. I'm looking at Ruck.com, and so it's not like in America where they publish chapter and verse of exactly how much pounds, shillings, and pence the players are getting paid. But they're speculating that Charles Piutau is on $1 million, that Owen Farrell's on 750 grand, that a Tadhg is on 800 grand. That's the level of money that you can get at the super clubs in England and the super clubs in France. You know, if that money's on offer at the most expensive position, and we have somebody who is genuinely the best in the world, should we begrudge him the opportunity to earn that money when his career could be shortened at any moment? And he's going to show up and play for Ireland in those windows. I don't know. I think it becomes very difficult to defend that position for exceptional cases. When we've made exceptions before, like Tommy Bowe went away and played brilliantly and came back and played brilliantly, and like this is not necessarily the kill shot to Irish rugby that it has been in the past.
It's changed, but it's changed so much since then. Like you look back at in that decade when Tommy Bowe was abroad playing with the Ospreys and things like that. There were so many Irish players playing abroad. It was very much a pick and choose when you actually apply that rule. For the most part, it was actually really just for players playing in France. There were guys playing in England and Wales and Scotland who would have been picked. It was definitely just for French-based players at the time. But since David Nucifora came in, and I think the difficulties they had around Johnny Sexton while he was away, when he was being absolutely flogged by Racing, he wasn't able to come back to Irish camps in particularly good shape. That I think there probably was a lesson learned in that period that they don't want to have to make that exception again.
And just
I don't think you can. I often hear people when they were talking about Simon Zebo as well saying, "Oh, well, they made the exception for Sexton." They did make the exception back then. It wasn't as hard a rule back then as well, and also they really, really did not like having to do it. And I think they will be doing everything they can that they won't have to do it ever again.
Yeah,
the Porter point is important in that context, though, that the drop-off between Sexton and the rest was bigger than the drop-off between Tadhg Furlong and Andrew Porter, and that's a key point.
Andrew Porter can't play 80 minutes. Like, that's not what happens anymore. You need two. You absolutely need two. So it's not the drop-off between Furlong and Porter. It's the drop-off between Porter and whoever's next, and that's a big drop.
It's true. There isn't somebody who's test-ready at the moment. I guess that's up to the Leinster Academy to produce another one.
At the same time, people are trying to move Andrew Porter off to Loosehead as well, and that would essentially leave a massive gap.
Yeah, I don't think that makes any sense. It's especially not, and it's obviously not going to happen now while Furlong has this negotiating position over them over the next few months. I just think that, like, professional sports players risk life and limb, particularly, we understand the concussion issues around rugby. Like, they should be allowed to make as much money as possible. And here is a tiny window where he could make life-changing money, and we're going to say, no, you can't do that because you need to stay here, and we're going to manage your minutes and you play for Ireland. And it's like, no. I understand the point, and I know why the IRFU have done what they've done. There is also part of me that thinks we have now got such a backlog of talent coming through that at some point we're going to need to send the 22 to 24-year-olds or the 26 to 28-year-olds who haven't made it off and see if actually playing week in, week out, they emerge as players who could contribute at international level, but who will cut our nose off to spite our face. Like, at the moment, the backlog of talent coming through at Leinster is being shuffled to the other provinces, but like, eventually they're going to get stocked up too. And the Scott Penleys of the world who need game time to see if they're actually ready to explode into the national team, they're not going to get that game time. Like, is Kieran Frawley and Harry Byrne going to get enough game time at Leinster over the next few years that we'll actually be able to establish, yes, they are international quality? At the moment, maybe not. Maybe they will, because maybe Sexton finishes up sooner than we think. But there are other out-halves coming through at 17, 18, 19. Some of them need to get some game time somewhere. And if we're saying if you ever leave, you can never play for Ireland, then there's kind of an unintended consequence where no one ever leaves, and the opportunity blockers end up taking spaces in squads that might prevent superstars from emerging.
I disagree that nobody ever leaves. I think we're actually seeing more and more of it in recent years, that a lot of younger players are taking the opportunity or taking the risk or chance to go off to France or England if they think they're the 5th or 6th or 7th in line in a particular position coming through at the academy, that they are actually taking the risk and going off to France and England, and in a lot of cases are proving themselves to be excellent players, and they're coming back to Ireland then as better players as well, having benefited for it. Look, I think it's just a risk we have to take when we're a country that only has 4 professional teams. I think we're at the sweet spot where four is what we can do properly, and I think if they were to try actually like ham fist in a 5th professional team to the Irish system, I think everyone else could suffer as a result. I think the.
So I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying loosen the hard and fast rule and allow some players to go.
I know, yeah. But what I'm saying is, like, I also don't think they would be able to do that system as well, because, I think there are enough players going out and getting the experience now.
But like, is that not the thing, though? Is that, like, so say what Neil's point there, Ger, is that they let players go abroad. Say Kieran Frawley. What would be the harm in letting him go abroad, and then if he shows himself to be good enough for test level, then he comes back and plays with an Irish province. The Irish, if you go out, pick up the phone to him and say, come back next season. It doesn't necessarily need to be, he's stuck in France now, we can never bring this guy home, he can never play for Ireland. Well, it would only be to help his development and then bring him back to an Irish province.
But bring him back to an Irish province, what if he's like, marries a local, What if he has like time of his life and decides that...
The local can come live in Ireland.
I mean, it's like, but the only way we'll pick him now is if he comes back to Ireland, and like we already have established out halves at Leinster and Munster, say, and so the option is one of the other...
that's like if it's one of the other provinces, it's one of the other provinces.
And I'll take less money and I'll live somewhere I don't want to live, that I haven't got any affinity for, or I can earn more money and have the lifestyle in a place that trusted me and helped me to develop my game. It's like there's a roadblock there, I think, to talent development that assumes that these 4 teams are going to be the only way that we develop talent. And I don't know, I just think that there's history is littered with late bloomers, particularly in Irish sports, for all sorts of reasons, and I think not allowing ourselves to select some of those players or even take a look at them in the context of an Ireland squad is a bit limiting. And just on the Furlong one in particular, like, how do we develop the 3rd and 4th string tight heads if there is always going to be these 2 lads at Leinster, and then, so they go off for the international duty, and whoever comes in for the games that are of lower importance? Like, we'll never get to see the 3rd and 4th string tight heads at Leinster playing in big European games, because it'll always be the 2 incumbents. If Furlong goes, actually that opens up an opportunity for Leinster to pick somebody who could potentially be Ireland level.
That's not really a massive prize for the risk of allowing Tadhg Furlong to leave. That that you could establish a relatively decent 3rd choice tight head prop.
Depth is a huge prize, though. It was the reason that we got kicked out of the 2015 World Cup.
No, depth is a huge thing, but there are more than... Leinster aren't the only province in Ireland. Like, you have between 4 and 5 tight head props at Ulster, at Munster, at Connacht. You're talking, there's another 12 to 15 professional tight head props outside of Leinster as well that are being, in theory, developed constantly. So, like, I think if you're Leinster and you have Tadhg Furlong and Andrew Porter, and you're able to tip along and improve a couple of players coming throughout the Pro 14, where realistically they are still going to get 10 to 15 games a season at least, like, that's absolutely fine. Okay,
let's move on, because we haven't solved this. Munster's line-out against Ulster is our first feature this week.
Yeah, it is. Basically, I've picked out three separate lineouts actually from games over the course of the weekend. 2 from the Munster-Ulster game and 1 from the Super Rugby Super Rugby Aotearoa final in New Zealand as well. But this Munster one we're going to look at first, if we get our first picture up on the board. So, as you can see, this is in the early stages of Munster against Ulster. Do you remember a few weeks ago in that Leinster game, we had Mike Haley going up for the lineout?
Yeah.
There he is again, as you can see, with the yellow arrow, standing up at the front of the lineout, and he had 4 big hefty forwards, all potential jumping and lifting options behind him as well. Gavin Coombs, Peter O'Mahony, Tadhg Furlong and Finian Wycherley. And there's a big gap between Haley and that pod of 4 forwards as well. So you're kind of wondering what's going on here. And then the other man to look at as well is Chris Cloete with the red arrow pointing at him. He's standing as the official receiver, but once the ball is thrown in, once the ball leaves Niall Scannell's hands, he's going to be able to come into the line out and act as, because what he's known as is a participating player. So the things to look at: Mike Haley, we want to look at the gap between himself and those 4 forwards, and we also want to look at Chris Cloete as well. So we're rolling on to our next picture. So we can see this is the point that the ball is about to be thrown. Mike Haley makes his move. He jogs towards the back of the line-out. The Ulster players, though, don't follow him because naturally their eyes are kind of fixed on that pod of 4 Munster forwards who have started to fill that gap in front. They've all started to walk out towards the sideline, up towards the front of that line-out, led by Gavin Coombs. But what's going to happen here is you can also see behind number 3 for Ulster, Tom O'Toole, there's a nice big gap there. That's what Mike Haley is going to run back towards, into that gap. Peter O'Mahony, number 6, he is going to turn and step in there as well, and he's going to be lifting Mike Haley from the front. And as soon as the ball is thrown from Niall Scannell's hands, Chris Cloete will dart in there and lift from the back. So Peter O'Mahony initially will be lifting from the front on his own, and Chris Cloete is going to come in and just give them a little helping hand at the end. And you can see they're circled. That's the Ulster hooker, John Andrew. He's standing in as their receiver. He's kind of pointing into that gap because he knows obviously there's a lot of space that's being left idle there with their players just watching that pod of Munster forwards. So this is the point. The ball is thrown now as we move on to our next clip. So yeah, the ball is in the air at the moment, and Mike Haley, as you can see, he's just about to jump, and you can see directly in front of him, Peter O'Mahony is there, is braced to lift, and Chris Cloete is still kind of making his way in because he obviously has about 2.5 meters to make up to step into that gap. But obviously the reason you have someone like Mike Haley jumping in this position is Mike Haley is going to be quite light. Peter O'Mahony is going to be able to lift him on his own initially, and we'll probably just need Chris Cloete to step in and help him out for the bit of stability when they're at the top of the lift. Gavin Coombs then is the next arrow. What he's going to be doing is he's stepping out of the line out, and he's going to be the new first receiver. So the plan is that they're going to have the likes of Gavin Coombs, they're going to have Tadhg Furlong and Finian Wycherley all coming around that corner and taking the pop off from Mike Haley down into a load of space that they've created. And the Ulster forwards obviously have stayed up at the front. You can see they've lifted Alan O'Connor. So they've committed quite a few players towards the front of that lineup, but Munster are trying to bring themselves back out towards the back of it, loop around and hit that space. So again, we're going to our next clip. And as we can see, this is the point that Mike Haley is kind of just about to catch the ball. But what we can see is we want to circle. This is Chris Cloete. This is kind of where the start of it goes wrong a little bit for Munster. As you can see, he's just about a little bit late arriving there. Because if you can see there, he's almost kind of perpendicular to Mike Haley and Peter O'Mahony. Like Peter O'Mahony is lined up directly opposite Haley and he's lifting him up like that. Whereas Cloete is having to lift him like that. So he's kind of just off balance ever so slightly, and what it's doing is it's starting to push Haley out towards the try line. It's just the momentum of the lift. He's lifting him like that. Like remember we saw Ryan Baird a couple of weeks ago in that Munster-Leinster game as well, where the lift just kind of got ahead of him. He was started to walk out with it, and what ends up happening is Haley starts to drift, and he catches the ball absolutely fine, but it means he doesn't really calculate his kind of pop down correctly, and he kind of undercooks that and drops it. He's now too far away from Gavin Coombs when we loop on to our next clip. As you can see there, this is Gavin Coombs just coming around that corner. He's trying to take this pop, but Mike Haley, he just kind of undercooks the little pop down towards him, and that's where the play ends. But as you can see here, like Coombs is looping around. He was going to be hitting that right into space. He would have had Finian Wycherley and Tadhg Furlong for support, while those Ulster forwards are kind of caught out of position ever so slightly. They've moved out towards the front of the line out. It's a very, very elaborate move, but what they're obviously trying to do is to get Coombs running back in field, space in front of him, gain momentum. In fairness to Ulster, just out of shot, they have Nick Timoney reading the situation well. He's actually closing in that space. You can't really see him at the moment, but you would still make someone like Gavin Coombs favour to get over the gain line. And because those Ulster players aren't following, you can see how many of them are taken out of the defensive set for the first few phases at least. So what Munster would probably be doing here is have more forwards moving out in the open, and they'll just keep coming out around that corner onto the open side. where Ulster are going to be exposed with numbers, and then probably just, come back and change the angle of attack afterwards.
Okay, so that's the first one this week. What's next?
Next one is an Ulster line out from that game against Munster later on in the match, though, and it is. I know it's kind of linking back to another one we did a few weeks ago where Ulster, do you remember they went short with a line out against the Northampton Saints, and it led to that lovely little break by Alan O'Connor and ultimately ended up in a try. But they call a 5 metre line out here, or 5-man line out. They're 5 metres from the Munster line. The first person we're going to look at here, though, is Nick Timoney, who's standing there. He has the red arrow pointing at him. He's standing in as the receiver on the line out. Now, we go on to our next clip. What he does here, Callum Reid obviously steps up towards Geordie Murphy at the front of that Ulster lineout, who's going to be jumping. And what this is doing, obviously, this is creating a big gap at the front of the lineout, which Timoney is going to be running into, and he's going to be taking a short lineout. There's going to be no, it's just going to be straight into his hands on the run. So they have a lot of timing to get right here. The throw has to be. It's difficult to throw down like that over your head and keep the ball low. It's difficult to keep it straight when you're doing that. It's difficult for Nick Timoney to time his run so that he's stepping in at just the right moment, and also that he receives it beyond that 5 metre line. So here's how it goes. We'll roll it on to our next one.
Oh, yeah. We've got that.
Appear to have lost Neil.
Ah, that's unfortunate.
Geordie Murphy jumps, and he's lifted as if everything is normal. Munster by that. The ball goes into the hands of Nick Timoney. And as you can see, he's just beyond that 5 metre line. So everything is going absolutely fine. Timoney charges in, short throw executed well. Can be very difficult to time that, as I said as well. But as you can see from the black mark, he's there and the throw is straight. And we'll roll it on to our next one. And he gets absolutely smashed by Kevin O'Byrne. It didn't work. Munster's defence didn't buy it. Kevin O'Byrne absolutely levels him. Roman Salanoa gets in there for good measure as well, and Nick Timoney ends up. He does well in the end just to recycle the possession. But it brings us back to why they chose this, because we're going to go on to our last clip here as well of the Ulster line-out. And this is actually bringing us back to before the ball was thrown. So this is the setup just as Geordie Murphy joins. With the benefit of hindsight, obviously, we can pick this out. But it is difficult to see how this was going to work. So you can see there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Munster players are numbered there. That's 5 Munster players: Roman Salanoa, Kevin O'Byrne, Andrew Conway, and to a lesser extent then a little bit further away, Nick McCarthy and CJ Stander. Because that line-out is only 5 metres from the try line, Conway and McCarthy, for example, are able to defend far, so Conway and McCarthy, 3 and 4 there. They're able to defend far, far closer to the line-out than they would be if this line-out was pushed out towards the 22. Normally, they'd have to be 10 away. Because this is a 5 metre line out, they only have to go back as far as the try line. So straight away, they are closer to the action. They are closer to being able to defend. Also as well, this would be more effective out towards the 22, where the defence has to be further back. There's more space to attack and draw people in and kind of create overlaps. Here, though, you're outnumbered. Also, have a look as well at Roman Salanoa and Kevin O'Byrne, who have numbered 1 and 2 there. Now, shoulders are square. They're primed to make a tackle. They're not caught ball watching. They're guarding the space rather than following the ball. And then Ulster throw the ball to Geordie Murphy at kind of around, I would call that kind of a front middle position. So realistically, they'd probably be better if they want to be kind of taking someone down that blind side and drawing Munster defenders away. You want to be, in theory, dummying towards the back of that line out so that the eyes of maybe Kevin O'Byrne or maybe Andrew Conway is looking back there, or CJ Stander or Nick McCarthy, or a couple of them at least, just get caught ball watching a little bit, or caught watching the pod with the jumper and the lifters as well, rather than there's not much space being created there. Kevin O'Byrne and Roman Salanoa just had to keep their concentration for a couple of seconds, and they were more than capable of stopping that. If you looking at it there, that is a 2-on-3. 2-on-5 if you're being really, really generous.
So that did not work for them. Neil, we've got sidetracked. I mean, we were doing so well week after week after week. The type 5 was an actual 5 things. This week we got to 3. I blame Tadhg Furlong and the contract debate. But the 2 other things were that final line-out, which we'll do next week, and then the discussion about free-to-air TV, which I think we're going to have plenty of time to talk about, because obviously the deal has been announced. The impact of it on Australian rugby, I know, is something that you wanted to talk about, but we'll get into that properly next week, because it's definitely worth spending a bit of time with. Neil, thanks very much.